So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining our learning lab today at Housing California on weathering the pandemic, emergency rental assistance, and beyond. And so, as we all know, it's been quite a year during the COVID pandemic, and particularly for low-income households who may have lost employment, had work hours cut, and who've struggled to pay the rent and cover their basic expenses this year. And then on the other hand, nonprofit affordable housing providers have been kind of managing this double bottom line, where they are trying to serve their communities, serve their residents, and at the same time make sure that their properties are operating as they need to be, that they're paying their mortgages, that they're meeting their investor requests, and that they can continue to maintain their properties. So it's also been a time, though, of unprecedented governmental interventions, including the passage of SB 91, which extended the eviction moratorium to June 30th and approved new rental assistance of $1.4 billion from California's share of federal rental relief funds. But rolling out this large rental assistance program in short order has brought challenges. A report from the California Department of Housing and Community Development showed that of the 490 million in requests for rental assistance that they received through the end of May, only 32 million had actually been paid out by this time. So the money is trickling out. And that also doesn't include the cities and counties that run their own rental assistance programs. So it's been a challenge. So we hope to talk through those challenges today, some of the next steps, some of the changes that have occurred. So we'll be talking about how nonprofits have responded during the pandemic, including the use of emergency rental assistance program. But we'll also be talking about other strategies that they've taken during the pandemic. We'll be looking at both, the community response as well as the response within the affordable housing portfolios. We'll be hoping to kind of exchange experiences, because we think that probably a lot of the folks in the audience also have, learned a lot during this year and have also been trying to access the rental assistance program and may have lessons learned to share as well. So what we're hoping to do is start out with presentations from our panelists, followed, each presentation will follow with some Q&A. You can either use the chat to type in your question and then we will answer it. Or if we can, we'll allow people to unmute themselves and ask their question at the end of the presentation. Then after the panelists have been able to give their presentations, we'll take a little short stretch break. We're here till 3 o'clock, so want to make sure that we get a little break. And then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end and conversation, because again, I think people probably are really interested in kind of sharing notes and exchanging experiences. So I think what I'll do next is just ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and maybe say a little bit about what you're going to be speaking to today and what you hope kind of the main takeaways might be for the workshop today. Maybe we'll start with you, Tanua.
Sure. Thanks so much, Diana. So this afternoon, well, first, let me introduce myself. I'm Tanua Thrash Intuk. I'm Executive Director for the LISC Local Initiative Support Corporation, Los Angeles office. And for the purposes of this panel and the work that I'll be describing, I serve as the California market lead on behalf of LISC in helping to stand up the local partner network. So a series of organizations across the state that we are contracting with who are helping us to reach those vulnerable households, and in particular, help those households complete the application for rent relief as well as utility assistance. So I'll talk a little bit about that as an important part of the strategy to reaching households, and also how it has informed the process of creating a more accessible application, and just a little bit more about sort of, the partnership with HCD and how we're going about making sure that we can reach all the households. So thanks for having me today, Diana. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Scott Carey then.
Thank you, Diana. Scott Carey, I work for Mid-Penn Housing. I'm one of the directors of property operations. What I'm going to speak on today is kind of our journey through the rent relief process. I'm going to focus in on housing is key through the state. I'm aware that we have a lot of different people from all over the state that might be putting in rent relief with different jurisdictions. But for the purpose of my discussion, I'm going to focus in on our journey through the state application process. Turn it back to you, Dinah.
Okay, thanks. So Shiata, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, of course. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sushiata Vuti. I am Director of Asset Management with Community Housing Works. Today, I will be talking about an initiative that Community Housing Works have put together, our own rental assistance program that we managed within our portfolio. So just kind of a little more details into that. And what I'd hope for the group here to take away from my presentation really is to know and understand that you can take an initiatives within your own internal organization. And in addition to that, just processes, operating processes, and how to streamline it if that's something that you're interested in. Thanks, Diana.
Thank you. And then before I think we move on, I would love to do a poll if we can, that I'm hoping one of the Housing California staff can help throw up the poll for me. What my hope is that we could use this poll to get a sense of who is in our audience today, since there's too many people to have you all introduce yourselves. So if you could choose, a category as well as you can. I know many people fall into more than one category. You might be a property manager and an advocate. So just, pick the best you can in terms of which category that you think you fall into. Let's see. Okay, it's still moving around a little bit. Okay. We have a good mix. It looks like. Okay, we have a pretty good mix here. It's still moving though. Okay, can people see the results of the poll? Let's see, there we go, share results. Okay, you guys are seeing it now, right?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so yes, it's a pretty wide mix of folks, which is great. It means we'll have a wide range of perspectives and experiences. So that is much appreciated. So I think I will go ahead and start up the PowerPoint presentation, and we'll start with Tanua to kick us off. I'll share my screen here.
Thanks so much, Diana. I should also mention that I'm a board member for Housing California. I'm sure that the team would want to make sure that I said that as well. So go ahead and pull up, I guess this is our opening slide. Feel free to move to the next slide.
Just a second.
So what I'll be doing is talking a little bit about the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program. And in particular, of course, this will be grounded in So first, I'll be talking about the California COVID-19 Rent Relief Program, and this will be grounded specifically in LISC's role as serving as the coordinator of a series of organizations across the state who are helping vulnerable households and Californians who may need additional assistance complete this application. Many of you probably already know that this application is online only. And we know that for a lot of households, that may mean that they don't have access to broadband, they don't have internet access, maybe they do, but there is a diverse language need and they need to be able to get assistance in their language. And, in other cases, people are disabled and aren't able to get out if they need assistance to get to an organization. So these are the kinds of things that we have designed for as part of the program. Next slide. So you'll see me refer quite a lot to the term housingiskey.com. That's the website where you can find out information about the program, apply as both a tenant and a landlord, and get additional details specifically about, how you might qualify for the state program or for a local program. The application and the website right now quickly allow you to be able to determine where you would go in order to access information. The phone number here is listed in as the official application center. So at this phone number, if someone has applied and needs updates on their application, they can get them here. And a case manager, if you are assigned one, would also can be reached via this phone number here. Next slide. So just to level set, making sure everybody knows what SB 91 did in terms of what these federal resources, how they're being applied in California. I think we talked about the fact on this call that the state of California in the first tranche received $2.6 billion. And the eligible uses and dates are listed herein. So unpaid rent, so what's also called rental arrears, past due rent, would be counted from April 1st, 2020 to May 31st, 2021. Future rent is from April 1st, 2021, and up to about 3 months at a time can be eligible for the program as it stands. Unpaid utilities, similar time frame. And future utilities, though, are still paid in arrears going forward because that'll be based on the actual usage for that household. But households can apply for assistance for utilities going forward in addition to those looking back. Next slide. So for the state of California, the legislature took in those federal dollars and put forth SB 91 that really governs how the state has designed the program. I just want to mention that there are 3 types of program implementation strategies within jurisdictions, and those are options A, B, and C. So let's talk a little bit more, next slide, about what that means. So option A jurisdictions, and this is important because people are out there talking with folks trying to figure out, where do I apply? Where do I qualify? Do I apply to the state program? Do I apply to the local program? How do I know? And while I have these on the slides here, again, as a reminder, on the website, you go to the website and you put housingiskey.com, you key in your address, it'll help you access where you qualify. So let's just talk about option A. Option A are either those jurisdictions that opted in, so determined that they wanted to go with the state program, or are counties whose populations is less than 200,000. So that's listed here on this slide. I call these the all-in jurisdictions. All of these jurisdictions are in with the state program. Next slide. Then there's option B. These are jurisdictions that determined who were in size, even as cities over 200,000, that they wanted to run their own local programs. So I consider these what I say like the all out programs. They're not in the state program. These are if you reside in one of these jurisdictions, then you need to apply at the local level at a local in a local site. But if you do go to the housingiskey.com website, I love that the state has decided that there is no wrong door. So if you go there and you put in your address and you find that you're in San Diego County, for example, then the state website will pop up and tell you where to apply locally in San Diego. And then, of course, there's always something tricky, like the County of LA is in the program, but the City of LA and City of Long Beach and City of Santa Clarita is in like an option C. Gets a little confusing. So having that tool is very helpful. Next slide. So then we have our option C jurisdictions. And these are jurisdictions that are going to run a local program, but they're also going to be working with the state and have part of their program administered by the state. These option C jurisdictions sometimes ran programs early. In some cases, they've determined they only want to do rental assistance and not utility assistance. Some of them have really wanted to focus on very low income households at 30% of AMI and below. So these are hybrid jurisdictions that will both run their own program and then will turn over to the state data, information, and the rest of their funds that are administered by the state. Next slide. So that's what, when we say option A, B, and C, sometimes you might hear that I see a number of public sector partners on the line. That's what that refers to. In addition to then determining your eligibility, I thought it was really important that we talk about the fact that we are using data to really understand where are the vulnerable households throughout the state. And so LISC has brought on Urban Footprint, a mapping company, to help us really look at the eviction risk index. This is a map of the state of California, just to orient you quickly from a visual standpoint as to what we're looking at. Those areas that are grayed out, those are option B jurisdictions. Those are those municipalities that are providing their own rent relief program, not as part of the state program. Housing is Key. The darker areas that you see on the state map here are the areas where we have the highest risk of eviction based on both census data as well as pulse surveys that have been taken over the last few months regarding households and how they feel about their eviction risk. The pink is a little bit harder to see, but there's an outline there, and those are our option C jurisdictions. And the yellow dots scattered throughout the state, which represent a little over 120, are our local partner network organizations. This is where they're located, and the circle around them represents about 25 miles from their main offices. Some organizations are providing service just at their organization, and others are providing service throughout the state. This is just a close-up look at, for example, Southern California and where the eviction risk is. The Bay Area, Sacramento area, Northern San Joaquin area. Next slide. Central Coast and the Southern San Joaquin area. Next slide. And northernmost part of the state. So in order to reach to those households, we've developed a local partner network. Next slide. These are organizations who are committed to getting out into communities, either by doing doorstep appointments or taking phone calls or taking in-office appointments. At the time of this slide, we had about 110. We're continuing to grow, and we're accepting applications from organizations from across the state as we speak on a rolling basis to add to the network so that we can service those needs and demand for the public. We're servicing about 13 languages, and approximately 93%, and it's growing, of households that are eligible are within the 25-mile radius of a local partner network. I've talked about this urban footprint mapping that you see here, and we're using that to really try and understand where we need to target our time and energy. We've also developed a scheduling system. And through that scheduling system, as of a couple of weeks ago, we had gotten to about 5,000 appointments. But we also note that some of our organizations have been holding appointments outside of that scheduling system. So we're estimating at that time that we probably have almost 14,000 appointments that have been held with organizations and individuals who need assistance. Next slide. This is just a resource key for your reference. So just as a reminder, housingiskey.com, that's where you go for more information about the program. If an application is in and you need additional assistance, that's the state application number there. If you have clients or know of folks who need assistance with completing the application, this is our local partner network appointment center. They can call there and get connected with resources. And we are also actively seeking partners to participate in the program. If any of you on the line want to make sure that folks in your network and your community are also aware of this program and want to send it out in your newsletters or on social media, we maintain a social media toolkit for the public and can get you connected there. Slide. All right, so I think this is just a picture so you have a sense of what's happening at the website. We're encouraging people to apply right now. While it's not first come, first serve, it is a finite resource and we want to make sure that households get in and apply. Next slide. This here just kind of describes the eligibility. Tenants have to have an email address to apply. I think Scott and maybe some others will talk a little bit about that. And we know for a lot of households that represents a barrier. And that's why it's so important that we have local partners and leaders like you all who can help people get connected. They also have to demonstrate a hardship associated with COVID-19. That could be both loss of income as well as increases in costs. So utility costs, childcare costs, elder care costs, other healthcare costs as a result of compliance with the public health requirement. And of course, households cannot earn more than 80% of the area median income. That's a federal requirement. Next slide. So we've done some simplified improvements of the application early on. The federal legislation was pretty light in terms of what we would need to collect. And so we had to be very thoughtful about that. But over time, more information has come out from the federal government regarding what is acceptable. So we've made the website a lot easier to navigate. Translations have been done professionally. There's the initial application really focuses in on some of the basic questions so that people don't stop if they need help with uploading documents. The landlord email address was a required field, and now that is no longer required, but encouraged. And the uploads for the document is moved to the end for the application. This means that applicants can get quite a lot of information into the application. And if we find that they're not able to complete it in the end, we can get them additional assistance to get those uploads. There's also several tips and notes throughout the application. And we've been able to streamline and decrease the number of uploads that is needed. So may it be as little as 2. There are some rare circumstances where there's a gold standard piece of data, that documentation that folks can provide, and only 1 document is needed at that point. That might be, for example, a tax return. Next. So those are the updates for now, and I look forward to your questions regarding the program. We can go ahead and skip this one. Those would be questions for later.
Okay, I think I will go ahead and see if we can open this up for any questions for Tanua. I guess one question I would start out with is, could you talk a little bit about the timeline of kind of how soon people need to get applications in and what that looks like?
Yeah, so we opened the portal on March 15th of this year, and I appreciate you recognizing what a feat that was to design, open, and start implementing a program in an emergency circumstance so quickly. Um, there is not quite a first come, first serve. The legislation did call for priority on very low income households, under 50% of AMI, for example, as the first wave of applications that, as received, should be paid. And at this point, there are still resources available for households. We're hoping that the streamlined application will help people complete their application. And we are just absolutely encouraging households that believe that they're eligible to apply, and to apply immediately, right away. It gives the legislature a much better sense as to what the need is out there, and how we might program those dollars.
Okay, thanks. So if other people have questions, you could either just unmute yourself and ask, or you can also raise your hand, and we will try to find you. Did anyone have immediate questions, or you can also type them in the chat? Well, then maybe we will move on to Scott Carey. So let me go ahead and restart the
Ready?
I think so. Go ahead. Oh,
So as I explained to Diana, PowerPoints are not my forte, so mine will not look quite as nice as Tanua's PowerPoint that she put together. I get a lot of hassle with my team at Mid-Penn over my PowerPoint, so I'm not afraid to speak though. So happy to be here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Mid-Penn's journey through SB 91, rent relief, and helping our residents get rental assistance. So as I stated earlier, I'm going to focus in on the state program. As Tanua pointed out, I'm going to talk about those option A jurisdictions. For Mid-Penn, we're a nonprofit organization located in the Bay Area, hence the name Mid-Peninsula. And we had roughly, I think it was close to 700 applications that we went through the state with. So quite a few, large endeavor. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did to prepare, what we learned, and what we're doing now. So we thought we had it dialed in. I'll be honest with you. We did our research, and we came together as a team late February, early March, when we started getting word in regards to SB 91 and the rent relief program and what was going to be involved. So at a site level, we asked for all of our community managers to put together tenant leases, ledgers, and to get together our declaration of financial distress that we had provided through AB 3088 and SB 91. We had photo IDs in our files already. We're 100% affordable, so we have to income qualify our residents and do annual certifications. So we had copies of our TICs and 5059s that would show eligibility. We also, at a regional level, we put together W-9s for the ownership and property tax bills to show proof of ownership. So we thought we were pretty dialed in, and we had this great idea that we were going to meet at 5 in the morning at our central office on March 15th and have all of our regional managers enter in the landlord applications, and we had everything ready, and that would be it. So come March 15th, we're there at 5 in the morning as a group. Everyone's tired. We enter the building, and the program at the time, they're still, I think they're working out a few bugs. So we were told that it wasn't going to go live on the 15th. So we used that time to gather some additional information and through correspondence, it was great. The state had a number up, Tanua, had that up earlier. We were able to speak with a couple individuals that told us, no, it is going to go live. It looks like 5 p.m. So we elected to stay as a group and get in all of our all of our landlord applications that evening. And up until that point, we were dialed in. So once it went live, we took one property and we said, okay, we're going to use this as our test subject for everyone else. Pretty simplistic website. It was set up nicely, got the information in. But as Tanua brought up, part of what I'm going to be talking about lessons learned is the first snag we ran into was the tenant's email address. So we, not completely understanding the system, said, well, we're all here, we have all the information, let's just put in a placeholder for those emails that we don't have, which was roughly 90% of them. So we put down either the community email address or just a fictitious email address, thinking that we could go back and edit it if it was a problem at a later date. So if you want to move to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what we learned. So what did we learn? So that evening we got in all of our tenant applications, which are not tenant, landlord applications, was the feet. We got them all in. We then went to the tenant application because we didn't know at that time it was going to be a two-party system. So that was another lesson learned. So then we found out, okay, well, the residents also have to put an application. So what does that involve? So we opened up the tenant application and went in as though we were a tenant and found that it was 32 pages. So a little cumbersome. And there was some information in there that, we weren't quite sure that all of our residents would have. So we, what we did is we did our best to kind of get through and kind of gauge what information our tenants were going to need. We then had our community managers go to all of our tenants and schedule appointments for them to come in to enter in their applications. After going through the applications, we put together a cut sheet of all 32 pages with best practices on how those questions should be answered. Obviously, the tenants have to answer it their own way, but based on our going through the program and the understanding of it and what was needed, we put that together so that our community managers, when they had these meetings with residents, they could walk them through the process. So we did that. We had all of our residents within, I think, a 2-week period enter in, I think, 90% of the tenant side of the applications. Few snags. We did have a few residents that just outright, for whatever reason, didn't want to submit an application. We had some residents that stated they just wanted to do it on their own. So once we got all of those in, we were trying to monitor where we were at with the application process. And we soon found out that if we had an error, like we did with the emails, that you needed to go back through the state and ask for either a super user or caseworker to reopen the file if you do any editing. So you can't, once you enter in the application, you can't edit it without somebody from the state opening that up for you. So if you want to go to the next slide, talk a little bit about lessons learned and also what we're doing with that slide. So I touched on this. A big thing that really affected us as a company was a big setback were the emails. So what we did prior to those resident meetings is we put together cut sheets on how to create an email if they didn't have one available. We also got an affidavit or waiver signed by all of our residents that allowed us to assist them with the process. And then we helped them create emails. So that helped out quite a bit. because those of you that are not aware of the system, that landlord application has to link to the tenant application. If they don't link, it doesn't create that full connection, and therefore the likelihood of the application getting approved and processed for rent relief payment is highly unlikely. So what we did as a team is, like I said, we created those email addresses. We work with our residents. They agreed, I'd say about 80% of them, that we created this email address outside of their normal email address that allowed both us and them to access, to be able to check the tenant status. And like I said, we had them sign a waiver. They were fully aware of it. And this wasn't their emails. It was one that was created. For those individuals that had their own email addresses or uncomfortable, we just stay in constant contact with them, making sure that they're following up and they're checking the status. And if there's anything they need or any support, we made our computer labs available, office staff available for those individuals. So another lesson learned for us, if you're a larger company, as I said, we had probably 700 applications. The process of being able to monitor both 700 applications on the landlord side and on the tenant side, which requires you go into an individual email address, is quite cumbersome. So we have started to devise our own team of individuals that's what they do. They're checking the status. They're making sure that if there's something, you know, that needs to be uploaded, that we're working with our residents and we're getting that information uploaded. Because otherwise, a lot of these applications are sitting in this queue, and if nobody's acknowledging it, I imagine that it, you know, with the amount of volume that's gone through the state, it's going to take a long time for those administrators to get back through and contact everyone individually. So, you know, we've kind of tried to assist in that process to make sure that we're being diligent and we're checking the statuses as well. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We've opened this up for, you know, our initial applications when we got them in was all the way through the end of February. Then we did subsequent applications each month thereafter. And like I said, we as a team, there's a few of us that we check those application statuses and either follow up with the residents or the community managers to make sure that we're uploading information that's needed. So right now, as most of you, we're kind of in that pattern of, you know, we've got a lot of applications out there and just waiting for it to either get approved through Housing is Key or provide additional information as needed. So that's Dana, that's what I have. I imagine there might be some Q&A involved here, and I'm willing to kind of answer what I can.
Thanks for that. That sounds like a very complicated process. And I guess one question I'll just start with is, you know, what I've heard is that the application has been simplified. And I don't know, do you have a sense of how the application might be more user-friendly now, or how it's working for people who may already be in the system, and then there's a new application, and you know, how that's working?
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. So what, you know, we've tried to work closely with caseworkers to get information, like, you know, what the certain statuses, because, you know, we were getting some statuses that, you know, things were basically getting redirected, and that was what Tanua talked about earlier, talking about some of those other jurisdictions. We thought we had it dialed in, but Santa Clara County kind of threw us for a loop because they weren't on that initial list that we had. So we were seeing some things like things were getting redirected. And where I'm going with that is you really need to check on the statuses because of some of the changes with the applications or some of the tweaks that happened after we did that initial application. There may or may not be a need to go back into the system to provide additional information. And it's kind of, I call it the hot potato. After you submit it, it's with the state. If the state needs anything in return, they send out an email either to the landlord or to the resident saying this is what's needed now. And if you're not checking that, that's kind of sitting in your queue. If you don't provide that information, the application is not going to get approved. So that's why I said it, it's a lot of kind of follow up and making sure that you're checking those statuses. So the new application is great. I know they simplified it. I would still suggest that landlords work in tandem with the residents, because this is verbiage that not all residents are used to. There is information that's requested that they may not readily have available. That's things like their ledger. They may just not have that. They may not have kept a copy of their lease. There's certain things that working in conjunction with the landlord is really helpful. So I would suggest some sort of outreach to your residents and making sure that if they need assistance, that you're there to assist them. And also just kind of knowledge of the system itself. We had some residents that were thinking that money would go directly to them. There's people that thought if they did that, they would get 100% rent relief. They need to understand that the landlord has to buy in. Otherwise, I believe it's 25% is what they could get up to, not
That's correct.
80, not 80%. And we as landlords, when we enter into these agreements, we agree to waive that additional 20%. So there really is a vested interest for the residents and the landlords to work hand in hand in this program.
Okay, I see a question in the chat for any of the panelists. Like how does an applicant know how much they'll receive for past payments and future payments?
So one, I wanted to also clarify that part of our role is very outward facing and connecting and helping people complete the application. In addition to that, the case management team that Scott described is run by another contractor, which is Horn LP, and they're using a software called Neighborly. So sometimes you'll hear those terms, and those case managers come from are hired by that company. So I do want to note that all of those who've been sitting and maybe haven't completed their application, they should have received an email recently from the system letting them know that the application is simpler and to go in and to complete it and hopefully, go ahead and hit the final submit. So the question to how much does an applicant, how much will you receive will depend on a couple of things. So the program as it currently stands under SB 91 says that if your landlord participates and you participate, and you and your landlord agree on how much 100%, how much were you owed, or how much did you owe, and how much is your rent. If you and the landlord agree on that, and both of you are in the system and both of you qualify for the program, then the calculation is fairly simple. You know that if you've completed everything, the landlord's completed everything, you would be eligible at this point for up to 80% of the arrears of what is owed for your rent, and you would receive, the landlord would receive that. If the landlord does not apply, and only the tenant applies, and the tenant is eligible, and the tenant is deemed to be eligible, then the tenant would, as Scott, we talked about, would receive a maximum right now of 25% of what is owed on the rent. For the utility payments, so on the rent, we'll just say if there's a discrepancy with what you think you owe and what the landlord thinks you owe, like that. So if those discrepancies exist, until those were resolved, that'll be the basis under which your 80 and 25% get determined. On utilities, the state of California, unlike a lot of other states, is working directly with utility companies. So the utility companies are cooperatively working with the state to confirm how much arrears are for eligible households. This then will allow for 100% payment on those arrears for those eligible households, for those eligible expenses during the time period that I described. And then when it comes to utilities in the future, again, they're paid in arrears. If someone applies for future support for utilities, those are paid in arrears based on actual usage and the actual amount of the utilities. And utilities range. So you'll notice in the application, there's all sorts of utilities that can be accommodated for under this program.
And I'm curious, and actually, this would be a question for not just Scott, but others in the audience as well. But how successful has Mid-Penn been in actually receiving any money? Like, how far along have you gotten in terms of actually getting any checks?
Yeah, that's been, to be quite honest, a little frustrating. And that's what I said. It's, you really need to check those statuses and find out, because, we've had, I look at it as there's a lot of users that participate in this. You have individuals at the state that are reviewing the information. For us, you have the landlords who are putting in information, and then you have the residents that are putting in information. And having it as a 2-application system becomes a little, like I said, it's a little complicated. So we've seen out of those 700 that I think we've applied for, we've had maybe a handful of payments. Now, outside of the state program, through some other local jurisdictions like Alameda County and City of Fremont, we've had a lot of payments through that system. So it's been a challenge. We continue to work for it. I think it's a good program. And as Tanua put together, people had to put this together relatively quickly. I just think one of the challenges is you have kind of a threefold, effect here, that, there's the state administrating it, there's the tenants, and then there's the landlords, and everyone has to kind of work together to make sure that application, all the information is needed and it flows through. So we've had some success. I've had some conversations with people at other companies, and our in-house counsels had some back and forth as far as payments made. So I think we're right in line with everyone else as far as payments, and we're starting to see kind of an uptick in those payments recently. So I have faith that it's forthcoming. But as I noted, you really, really, really want to make sure that you have somebody that's monitoring those statuses to make sure that, like I said, that hot potato is not in your, it's not on your plate, because if it is, there could be some information you need to provide. In some certain situations, it was just a matter of going in and hitting the submit button. But if you didn't hit the submit button, it was just going to sit there. So make sure that you have somebody dedicated to that.
And I was gonna, the state has been bound by the state legislature and ensuring that we had to pay out first those who were at the very lowest income levels, and depending on Mid-Penn's portfolio, and who, if someone's over 50% of AMI, they may not be the first to be paid. And when you think about a local jurisdiction, the state has probably paid that same amount, if not more, but we're spreading it out across the entire state. So it just looks a lot different when it comes to a local jurisdiction that is paying out a smaller or similar amount, but just has less payments to make.
I think I might decide to hold on questions for the moment and then move on to Sociata to make sure we have enough time for her to give her presentation. And then we'll be able to return to some Q&A. So I will go ahead and start up the PowerPoint presentation again momentarily here. Okay, Sociata, you want to take it away?
Yes, Thanks, Diana. Appreciate it. Before I jump into the actual presentation itself, just want to share a little bit with the group a little more about Community Housing Works. We are a nonprofit owner and developer of, we own 42 properties throughout California, but most of our communities are in San Diego County, and that equals to nearly 4,000 units. We serve families, seniors, people with disabilities, formerly homeless, and veterans, just to name a few. And so with that, I'm going to be, again, today talking about a rental assistance program with a little bit of a different perspective from what Scott and Tanua had shared a little earlier. And that is because this is a rental assistance program that Community Housing Works actually initiated and put together with funds from that were reallocated from donors and outside grants that were received that was repurposed for this. And so, want to share that the team consisted of our asset management team. For our communities, we have a third-party property management company. So we also are inclusive of the third-party management company. And then we worked really closely with our resident services to really make this successful as well. Similar to the bigger emergency rental assistance program, where we had to kind of put our heads together really quickly, come up with a plan really quickly. And this is what I will be sharing with you is a result of that, and with that comes learning. As we look into potentially having another round, what does that look like? So first of all, process. We put together a framework, was created and included priorities for the awards, setting the expectations, making sure that, again, this program was made only for our portfolio. And so we wanted to make sure, things like, making sure that the applicant is a resident of Community Housing Works owned community, annual income doesn't exceed 60 median income. One of the things that we had required was that this program, we wanted to make sure that we were really impacting those households that really needed the funds. And so households that were already receiving subsidy, we said was not qualified for this particular rental assistance program. Similar to what Scott was sharing in terms of eligibility, showing a hardship from COVID-19. And then we also set kind of a criteria, kind of a tiered criteria of who the award would go to. So families was made a priority, and then it was seniors, and then formerly homeless, and veterans as well. So those are kind of the priorities, setting the framework for this program, this internal program. And the application scoring was also then created based off of that framework. And we met weekly team meetings to make sure, again, that we were all aligned, and that we were keeping each other up to date on what the status of the program. So met weekly with the asset team, Achieve, which is our resident services, business intelligence, which is IT, and advancement, which is our grants department. We'll keep it here under schedule. Just kind of wanted to share, maybe it could have been a little better with showing a timeline here, but just to show everyone that we kicked this off in November of last year. And that the kickoff was, everyone come together. Hey guys, this is what we want to do. Here's the framework. Let's figure out the best way to roll this and implement this this program. And so took us about a month or so to put everything together, the applications, the scoring rubric, etc. Applications were then open to residents for about 2 weeks. We had to extend the deadline. And one of the reasons why we extended the deadline, and something important to understand too, is that we really wanted to make this process less cumbersome as it can be. We didn't want to create additional barriers for people to apply. And so that was one of the reasons why we extended the deadlines, because of something that Scott had brought up earlier with emails, people not having email addresses, access to computers, etc. And then you'll see here too, how long it took for us to go through the scoring of the applications, final awards. One of the other criteria that we had as a part of this program and application was that everyone who applied, and if they received a notice that their application scored high enough for them to potentially receive an award, that they committed to meet with one of our financial coach, so that the coach can better understand their situation, whether it's a budgeting challenge that they're having right now because of due to the impacts of COVID, or whether it was finding food sources, other types of resources. The coach was to help them with that. So that took a little bit, because that was a little something that was added that we felt was really useful, just to make sure that residents know that it's we're here to help and provide resources as needed. And then the final distribution of the awards happened earlier this year in March. Next. A little bit of the statistics. You'll see here, again, our portfolio consists of about 4,000 units. We received 323 applications, which is about 9% of the portfolio. And then just kind of some caveats there. This does not include duplicates or applicants that applied but then ended up moving out, or they received, they already had Section 8. And then of that, 202 applications were awarded. So 62% of those that actually applied were awarded. And then something to kind of make note of as well, which is a part of our learning, is that the original amount available for the program was $178,000. That was the amount that we had for our internal program. And then based on this award, the program was really, it was oversubscribed by approximately $60,000. Next. So some of the questions that I had as one of the leads in putting together the program, and as we kind of looked and reflected on the process, some of the questions that kind of came to mind for me were, what was really the main purpose of the CHW rental assistance program? Who really benefits? I know in the earlier poll today, I saw that there were a handful of asset managers that are in this workshop today. And so as asset managers, we were paying really close attention to the delinquent rents, right? We were looking at what was the rent collections during the last 12, 18 months. How was it fluctuating? And so with this program, what I learned was, as we were doing the scoring rubric, I was seeing that a lot of the people the households that applied actually were not in arrears, or at least not yet. And that could have been for various reasons, right? It could have been that they were using their credit cards to pay the rent, or they were borrowing money from family and friends to pay rent. They could have been, not buying food so that they can pay rent. There are various reasons for that. So it was really interesting because we thought going into this was that, well, there will be, we'll be helping those that are delinquent in rent and helping to relieve those that are delinquent in rent. But the question kind of boils down to, well, okay, is this program, to help anyone who has been impacted by COVID, and who's to say that one impact is worse than the other? Those are some of the questions that came about. How strict do we want those guidelines? And how do you avoid loopholes? Because in certain situations, we got wind of people, they were kind of, residents were kind of telling each other that, hey, don't pay your rent, because if you pay your rent, you're not going to get this relief. So don't pay your rent. So those types of conversations were happening. And we just wanted to make sure, well, what can we put in place to ensure people that we still want people to, if you're able to pay rent, please pay your rent. And you're still eligible. We're still considering your application. So those are just kind of things to think about. What is important to the mission of your organization if you're looking into an initiative such as this. Further, just looking at, what are some of the other observations and maybe best practices as we think about, future rental assistance program that we want to facilitate. I talked a little bit about staffing. We had to bring in a temporary staff person to manage the data entry because, again, we were moving really fast. And as fast as our IT was coming alongside us, there were some things that I'll show you in the next slide that were inefficient. And so this was kind of one of the things that just kind of wanted to note that to pay attention to staff. And then the time frame that we implemented this program, rolled out this program, happened during the holiday seasons. So it may seem a little slower only because of, we had to work with that, not only internally, but also be mindful of that for our residents as well. The counseling program, again, that takes time as well. And we want to make sure that we're providing quality versus quantity. And so taking that into consideration, how can we be more efficient and effective in that manner with that requirement if we want to continue that. And then just challenging at times to be objective when reviewing applicants' responses. Because again, going back to what I said a little earlier, how strict do we want to be in this guideline? The purpose of this program is to not create barriers, but rather try to make it as streamlined, straightforward as possible for our residents, so that they know that they have the opportunity for this program. And then always communication with residents, such a big thing that we are meeting weekly. We talk a lot internally. Always have to remember to pause and just if there's anything that has changed in terms of the deadlines, in anything as a part of the program, to make sure that we're communicating and updating residents as well. Next slide. So the next couple of slides, I just wanted to share with you, just kind of process. This was our really long process in terms of what happens when the application first gets submitted, who reviews it, when it's reviewed, what's that process look like? And you'll see that there are many steps before the applicant is awarded and the award is actually distributed. Next slide. And so I put a little thought into this, again, now that we've had time to reflect on the program that we initially put together. And then since then to the state, the local jurisdictions, as we've learned earlier today, have come out with more refined program as well. And so taking a look at that process and what we've done and what had worked, it came up with something a little more simplified. And that is, again, to start with property management. Property management has all the access to tenant information, to the tenant themselves, having them start off the application and then going to the applicant for verification before it comes to asset management for review, scoring, et cetera, and then distribution. So this may be a little more overly simplified than the last chart, but you can just kind of see that, taking that process of start with residents, then getting things verified by property management, taking that backwards, flipping it around, that is an opportunity for efficiency. So that's something that we want to consider in our next round. And that is all that I have. So I'm open for any questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And did you also participate in the, outside rental assistance programs, I'm assuming? And was
Yes, we did.
similar to Scott's, or did, maybe you could talk a little bit about your CHW's experience?
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
Programs as well.
Yes, we did. We did participate in all of the emergency rental assistance program that we were eligible for, or our residents were eligible for. Our experience with that program, really similar, just similar to Scott's in terms of, it's really tedious. We have been successful in getting awards. Don't know the full spectrum of it just because it's still ongoing. It's one of our bigger challenges, just, really leaning and depending on our residents, that they will submit an application, just as they said that they will. And what we've learned kind of in this last round of awards, at least for San Diego County, we did identify, a handful of residents that had high delinquency, but they did not. They said that they were going to submit, but they did not. And so we are working, our property management company is working with them to make sure that it does happen, because we don't want our residents to lose out on this opportunity. So keeping track is a really big thing, and being consistent about it. We have some of our teams in certain portfolios that are keeping their eyes on it like a hawk. We have others that are, again, more trusting of the process of, okay, they say it's happening, okay, it's going to happen. But as a result of that, we're seeing kind of some of those, some opportunities slip. So tightening that up a little bit is something that we're continuing to work on.
I think it's an interesting point that you make there, Sociata, because we are finding that people who are the most behind have the most to gain from the program, have the most difficulty accessing the program. And so we've been really thinking about the care that we're taking. Part of why it's so difficult is, just imagining the stress of families and thinking about being able to remain housed, to be able to eat, to try and, strategize and think forward. And the application becomes a daunting activity for those families. And so that's, we're grateful that we have partners like MidPen and CHW who are out there connecting with their portfolios. And we're encouraging all of our affordable housing mission-based owners to connect with your residents, because there are people who are not in one of these mission-based, housing owner situations. And that is really also what the local partner network is all about, is connecting people who are really having a hard time in general with the public health pandemic, and then making sure that they have all of the support that they need to get to, I love it, Scott, submit, right? Part of what we got to get to is get people to hit submit. And so that's, it's an important role that you all are playing.
I'm hoping we can maybe turn to a few questions that have turned up in the chat. One is an interesting one about, what if someone has borrowed money to pay their rent from family, and, how would that impact their ability to access the rental assistance? Does anyone know the answer to that question?
It's a matter that we are grappling with. The organizations that we're working with are saying to us, well, people maybe don't have arrears because they've done exactly what it says here. They've borrowed money from family and friends. They've borrowed from more predatory sources. And so they don't have a sort of a debt to a landlord, but they have a debt, what we are calling shadow debt, to some other entity and or set of individuals. These stories are important to surface, but they also speak to, at least for the state program, the need for people to have support for upcoming rent, right? For that future rent. If you have borrowed money in order to pay your arrears, that tells us you need support for future rent. So we are encouraging people to definitely put in an application, apply, show that you have a need for the future rent, so that that the program can accommodate that. And I think it's really, really important that people talk about this and really document this, and let it be known where they have gone to for other sources in order to cover rent. The federal government isn't really providing us with a lot of guidance on how to deal with this shadow rent. I know the state legislature is grappling with how to use resources to see, what might be the best way to handle this. But ensure, if people can let us know, make sure that they're, sharing those stories in the application, in the documentation, that will give the state a better sense as to where the need is, and how to address that going forward. But most certainly apply for that utility assistance, past and future, apply for rent relief for future rent.
Someone also posted a question about if you receive Section 8, but are having trouble making your portion of the rent payment. Does someone know how that would work if you were receiving Section 8 as well?
It shouldn't, the eligibility for the rent relief is the same. The only thing would be the program itself. So, the first thing I would suggest is, if you're working with that individual, whether it's through the housing authority or if it's through a Section 8 project, is to make sure that those individuals are letting the landlord know their financial hardship. If it's through the housing authority, they need to reach out to the housing authority, because they'll do a rent adjustment for that new income. That's the beauty of Section 8, is it's supposed to be, it's supposed to protect individuals. If they have a loss of income, their portion of the rent will get reduced, and the subsidy portion will increase. So I would start there. But as far as the eligibility for the program, if they can show a financial hardship related to COVID, they could still apply for that rent relief. What I'm not completely sure about, I don't work on the compliance side, is how does that rental that money that comes in, how do we handle it? I think it's probably handled as a one-time asset and not as income, but I don't know that for sure. That would be for individuals to work with their compliance team.
Yeah, so first and foremost, Scott's right. If you're receiving a voucher, if you have a voucher and are receiving subsidy assistance on your rent with that, first is go back to that source of the subsidy, go back to that housing authority and let them know you need a rent adjustment. There, we recognize that there are some rare cases where the tenant still owes, and that still may be difficult for the tenant to pay back. And the tenant could be eligible, if they're in the state's jurisdictions, can apply for the state program. The other element is if their utilities are not included there, they may also be eligible then for the utility program and should also, apply there as well. So those are, two areas where they might want to check in on. And then the way that this particular piece of, or the rent relief payment, if it comes to the tenant, there's been some care and consideration to make sure that it does not go against tenants' eligibility or require them to pay taxes on these funds. There has been care and consideration for ensuring that tenants are not adversely impacted by receiving this rental assistance. The same is not quite the same for landlords. Landlords do have to provide a W-9, which then gets reported, and they should check with their respective accounting teams to be sure on how that will impact their taxing at the end of the year. But tenants at this point do not have to provide that same documentation.
So I just had the realization that I had told people we were going to have a break, and I didn't give people a break. But what I'm thinking is maybe we'll go for another, 10 minutes and answer questions and see if we'll just end early, as 2 hours on Zoom is a pretty long period of time. So if people can stick it out for just a few more questions, that would be great. So I would also offer that if people want to just, speak up about their question, you don't have to use the chat. If you unmute yourself, we can hear from you directly. I'd be curious not only to hear questions, but to hear some people's experience with the program that are in the audience, whether you work for local government or you work for a community organization or you're a resident who's applied. I think it'd be great to hear if people feel like contributing to the conversation, and that would be awesome. So any thoughts?
On my slide that I didn't show, I did note there that this can certainly be an opportunity to take any feedback regarding the program, the state program. Housing is key. The thing about the team is that we had to stand it up very quickly, but we recognize that there are some elements as you operationalize things. We're happy to get feedback and incorporate that into making it a stronger program.
Hi, this is Jessica Gould. I'm sorry I came in a little late to this conversation, so if this was covered, I apologize. But I was wondering how developmental disabilities and the disability community is covered within this particular program within California. I mean, I know in general, a lot of these programs include homeless and unhoused, but people, the disability community can tend to have its own unique needs on top of homelessness and needing to be housed. So I was wondering where that population fits in this dynamic, if at all. Thank you.
Yeah, we certainly, the those who have different ability needs. The program is looking to accommodate those. I know that for our local partner network organizations that we have, we made it very clear that we can't just have organizations that people have to get to, especially if you have different abilities, and those abilities keep you from having the ease of access of being able to move around when everybody's to be safer at home, and all the systems are not working really well. So, please do get in touch with us at the appointment center if you need assistance with the application, completing it, getting it in. There we can arrange for someone to either chat with you by phone, by Zoom, or at your doorstep in order to make that happen. So that element at least is something that is being considered as part of the program.
Okay, my question was more in general, not specifically for myself, because I help within that population. I am disabled, but I was speaking as a person who actually works within the population as well. So I help within the DDID population.
Hopefully you can take this information back and share it with members of your community to make sure people know about the resource.
I definitely will. Thank you so much.
There's a gentleman with his hand raised. Oh, to our interpreter, I believe Eric is looking for someone to interpret for him. I believe it's American Sign Language is what he's looking for.
Okay. So I had a question regarding that particular section about people who get benefits like Social Security income. And if you get access to that, would you be disqualified from being a part of that housing project or that program? Because if you're already receiving a supplemental income, would you still qualify to be able to be a part of that? So I wasn't quite sure how to approach that. Would we still qualify, even if you don't have enough funds to be able to regulate your income? Or if you don't have enough money to pay for rent, is there any possible or feasibility to be able to get a little bit of assistance? Not like the full 100% like we were talking about, but somewhere around the ballpark of a percentage that we'd be able to still qualify for, even though still receiving SSI?
So for the Housing is Key program, based on the federal legislation, you really just have to be able to show 3 items. Of course, you need to, having arrears or rent that's owed is what would be applying for, or having difficulties paying rent going forward. So the 3 items are that you have to have had COVID impact. COVID impact may mean a loss of hours, a loss of employment, but it also could mean an increase in cost. So if you've had to change your lifestyle in order to accommodate the public health requirement. So, my son is here, I have a different kind of caretaker, or you had to pay for a different kind of schooling or utilities or make other purchases in order to outfit your home, like anything that was out of the ordinary in order for you to remain safe and comply with the public health standard is a COVID impact. You have to, show that you are in a circumstance where you have, due rent, where you are, and if you don't get it paid, you could be in an unhealthy circumstance, homeless, and really, need the assistance in order to cover that back rent or the rent going forward. And then the third area is that you have to, your income, no matter what the source is, the income is below 80% of the area median income. That makes you eligible for the program. So this is important for people to know and understand. The threshold for the COVID impact is very broad, and it was set that way because for some people, it's a loss of income. For others, It's having to, use resources that you otherwise would have used something else in order to remain safely at home and to comply with the public health standards.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm.
A question in the chat asking about whether you need to provide your lease agreement to apply for the program.
A lease agreement is a great document to have, and can help validate your name, your home location, the amount of your rent, all those kinds of things. And it's encouraged that if you can get access to that document, great. But if you don't have it, it does not disqualify you. You can still apply to the program. You can still get assistance. While it's, a great document to have, it's not necessary in order to apply to the program.
Okay, and there was a general question asking to kind of be walked through the process.
Yeah, this person seems to be trying to understand if they'll be notified if their landlord has participated in the program. So the important piece is to go ahead and check back in, as Scott was saying, to check back in on the status of your application. So go and sign back in to see if a connection has been made with a landlord application. There won't be, unfortunately, I don't believe that there's a proactive, they're not going to send you a notice, but if you go in and check, you can see that information.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's a back end to this, but I know that if you as a landlord initiate the application first, an email gets sent to the tenant letting them know that your landlord has applied on your behalf and vice versa. Because
That's
we've seen that
correct.
if a tenant puts in an application and an email, if the tenant has the email, gets sent to the landlord stating that that we have a tenant that has initiated an application. But as Tanua was indicating on both sides, if you look at the status, it will tell you if there's tenant information or landlord information needed. So if your landlord has not applied or has not provided all the information that's needed, when you look at your status, it's under the application status, it will say landlord information needed.
And I'm not sure if I missed any questions in the chat. I don't see any more. But I had one other issue I wanted to bring up that hasn't come up is the eviction moratorium is expiring in a few days.
Yeah.
It hasn't been extended yet. Is that correct?
I believe the CDC has extended theirs through the end of July, so I imagine the state will follow suit, but we don't have any information on that at this time.
Yeah. And that would be only potentially through the end of July, which isn't very long. So I don't know if anyone wanted, it's kind of related to the rental assistance question. If anyone wanted to talk at all about that, that aspect.
It is, we're feeling the intensity from among the public regarding, what happens when the eviction moratorium is lifted. We're feeling it on both the tenant side as well as the landlord side. And we have seen some local jurisdictions start to continue to expand eviction moratoriums for longer dates. We, are anticipating that California will have an answer within a few days, but it is right now, we've been focused on get your application in, apply to the program. We need to make sure we have an understanding of the magnitude of the need. I saw the shadow debt question there again. If someone has borrowed money from friends and family during the COVID crisis, they are COVID impacted, so they check that box. And if they're less than 80% earnings of the area median income, while they won't be able to show rental arrears, they definitely can confirm that they need help with their rent going forward, and they probably need assistance with their utilities too. But those are, apply, apply, apply. I think I had that on the slide 3 times.
To answer that question from CHW's perspective, we have had, in a sense, it's our eviction prevention program, an initiative that we've had in place for many years. And so, but with COVID, that program was actually put on pause and with the moratorium. And so I'm actually tomorrow morning, I have a call with our resident services, our financial coaches, and property management to talk about how that program can get reinstated, how it's going to look differently post moratorium, so that again we are helping families to stay in their homes. That is what we are here for.
Any other comments or questions or perspectives from the participants we have here? How about from our panelists? Any parting words or last points you want to emphasize other than apply, 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 which I think is maybe the most important takeaway from this whole workshop? Okay, well, it looks like we will wrap up a bit early. I thank you for your participation. Thank the panelists. And of course, thanks to Housing California for sponsoring the conference and this workshop. And I hope it was useful. And thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Diana. Appreciate your facilitation of today's call.
Oh, we have we have a question.
Okay.
Hi.
So I noticed you were talking about apply. But I mean, how do we actually go through that process? We're scared of getting denied. So I think there's going to be just this backlog if a bunch of people are also applying all at once as well. So what do you have to say about that?
So the capacity of the system is such that it has taken in hundreds of thousands of applications and has, been managed just fine. So I would not be concerned about being denied. Right now, if you need assistance, we say reach out. And I put the housing is key, I put .org, housingiskey.com in the chat. And that's where you would go to apply.
Okay, well, we hope everyone is eventually successful in accessing these billions of dollars in rental assistance. And best of luck to you. And thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a good
Thanks,
afternoon.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.